Hey, welcome back to Business 101, Introduction to Business. We are still talking here in Module 7 about the topic of operations and production. Now, you may remember in the last video we had basically suggested the premise that once you choose your strategy, then you decide on operations decisions so that your operations decisions executes your strategy hand in hand in a complementary fashion. And so right now, in this particular video now, then we're talking about one of the crucial operations decisions that you make in production, and that's the topic of layout choices. What choices do you make to how you will lay out your production? And I want to mention, just like in the previous video, this particular topic does have a supplementary video from the textbook publisher to really help you better understand what the differences are between the primary ways to lay out production might be. So let's climb right in. When we're talking about laying out production, how you're going to design your production, there are three main layout structures or diagrams or plans that generally you'll use when you are producing goods. The first is the process layout, the custom product layout, where the physical arrangement of production activities groups equipment and people according to function. That's the key word, according to function. Process layout groups production equipment and people according to function. We'll give you an example of that in a moment, but just want to give you the description here. That is distinguished between process layout and product layout. See, product layout, the second bullet point there, also known as a same steps layout. And that's a physical arrangement of production steps designed to make one type of product in a fixed sequence of activities according to production requirements. That looks like a bit of a word salad, but what we're really talking about is the assembly line. Think about making lots and lots of quantity of the exact same product, and if that product takes several steps to make, like for instance an automobile, right, then you arrange the production steps in a sequence, in a fixed sequence, so that you can most efficiently and quickly build many of the same thing over and over and over again. And then there is the less common, but the third layout choice, which is known as the fixed position layout, where labor, equipment, materials, all the resources are brought to one location where all the production work is done. Okay, so those are the three options. Process layout groups people and functions groups equipment and people according to function. There's the product layout, which is a lot like an assembly line when you're building lots of the same type of product. And then there is the fixed position layout where everything comes to one location. We'll talk about examples of that and how those might look now in the next couple of slides. So for a process layout, you can see here for a service provider that you have different functions grouped together. Okay, so this is a medical clinic, and like many medical clinics, you have different departments based on their specialty. You can see here, right, that they have, for instance, a department in the upper left-hand corner for neurology, whereas they have inpatient surgery in the lower right-hand corner. The pharmacy at the lower left-hand corner, you can sort of see how this diagram works. This is, by the way, of course, borrowed from your textbook, figure 7.5. And so you can see here that depending on what department, what problem you have, what physical or medical issue you want to get attended to, that will really mean that you may have an entirely different process flow than the next patient behind you or the one in front of you, right? One person is, they would need to see their OBGYN because they're in their second trimester of pregnancy, whereas someone else has this weird rash going on and another person has a broken arm. They'll all go to different departments depending on the flow. Now, this is also similar, for instance, to the departments in administration at the College of Marin, right? If you want to go and all you want to do is get a copy of your transcripts, you'll go to the registrar, which is one department. Versus if you're interested in admissions, you'll go to the separate admissions department, etc., etc. You get the idea here, right? It groups equipment, departments, people by function, and therefore is a relatively flexible layout that offers a lot of customization depending on what customer needs really are. Now, that's the first process layout. The second process layout, the second layout we talked about is the product layout, which is a lot like an assembly line. Now, this is figure 7.6 in the textbook, tries to describe a car wash. The type of automated car wash where you can see there in the left-hand side of the slide, cars wait, and they get cleaned out, and then they get the hot water spray, and then they go straight through this assembly line layout. They all go through the same thing to provide a same service to each of the customers. You can see that. Hot water spray, they wash, top wash and brush, side wash and brush, final rinse spray, the hot blower to dry off most of the water, and then hand wipe and clean up, right? So this is similar to, for instance, the assembly line that builds products like a iPhone or a Ford Focus automobile, or the same types of jeans that are always made by Levi's, right? Anything that produces mass quantities of the same service or the same good will typically use a product layout, kind of an assembly line way of producing. Finally, you have a product layout for goods production, right? So in this particular one, right, what are you looking at? This is, rather than providing a service, this is storm window assembly, a type of storm window that you would put on a house, right? You see the different workstations labeled below A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and each of the raw materials starts at A, goes all the way through to step H for packing, and they all follow the same steps. Now, the last layout that we don't have a diagram for, the fixed position layout, is pretty unique. Doesn't happen all the time, but typically for instance, goods that are so large they cannot be easily moved. Like if you're building an airplane, then what happens? You have a fuselage in the middle of an enormous hangar, and all of the mechanics, the assembly people, all the products, all the raw materials come to the airplane to construct the airplane in one fixed position. That's also similar, of course, to the production of, or the construction of, a large home, right? When you build a home, the home sits obviously at one geographical location, and all of the contractors, all the construction personnel, all the specialists come to the venue, to the house, in order to complete construction. You can see why, especially with very large immovable products, that makes sense, but it is relatively rare. And so really what we concentrate on in this chapter is the process layout versus the product layout. We've given you diagrams for that. Now, do want to, of course, remind you, there is a supplemental video from the textbook publisher I've also posted up in Canvas for you. You should take a look at that, as well as review these distinctions in the textbook. Hope that helps. We'll see you in the next lecture.